And now back to today's very timely topic on protecting the anywhere worker. To help welcome and introduce our panelists today, I'd like to now turn it over to Katie Goen.
Thanks, Bob. I'm happy to be here to moderate today's discussion. As Bob said, I'm Katie Goen, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Alert Media. And I'll kick things off today by introducing today's speakers. First, we have Peter Steinfeld. Peter's been in the emergency communications industry for more than 20 years now. He's the Senior Vice President of Safety Solutions at Alert Media, where he works closely with a wide range of organizations to help support their employee safety, business continuity, and emergency preparedness initiatives. He's also the host of the Employee Safety Podcast, which is a weekly podcast series here at Alert Media that was created for safety professionals. Peter previously held leadership roles at Symantec and Dell, amongst several other enterprise software companies. Hi, Peter. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today.
Of course. Well, I'd also like to welcome Sarah Prattley. Sarah is Vice President of Global Intelligence at Alert Media, where she leads a team of experienced analysts to monitor emerging threats and incidents worldwide. Prior to Alert Media, Sarah was the Vice President of National News for CNN's domestic news gathering unit, where she led the network's coverage of major events, including the Boston Marathon bombings, Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, numerous severe weather events, and more. During her decade there at the network, she developed a unique ability to assess, analyze, and decipher information quickly, which is a skill she now applies to her role at Alert Media. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Katie. Thank you for having us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. I'd like to give a quick overview of what we're going to cover in today's presentation. We'll talk about understanding an evolving workforce, which includes the difference between remote work and anywhere work, which is an important distinction. We'll review some of the key challenges that come with protecting an anywhere workforce. We'll then discuss global threat intelligence and how that can help you protect your anywhere workforce. And then finally, we'll cover some best practices surrounding how to safeguard and communicate with anywhere workers. But before we get into the presentation, I do want to take a quick moment to poll the audience today. This is going to give us a better understanding of everyone's status, but it's also going to help us direct the conversation today. So if you would take a moment to answer the question on your screen, which is which of the following best describes your organization's current remote or anywhere work plan? Is it hybrid, which is kind of a mix of in-office, remote, or anywhere work? Is it remote only? Or perhaps you're not offering remote or anywhere work options at this time. So I'm just going to give this a couple more seconds. If you could go ahead and submit your answers. And then Bob, whenever you're ready, if you could go ahead and share the results so that we could all take a peek, that would be great. Well.
Not surprising.
90% or more are offering a hybrid work plan at this time. So Peter, as you just said, let me go to you first. You said it's not surprising. Is that just based on the conversations that you're having with customers and hearing out there in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, everyone's still a little bit uncertain about what to do for coming back to the office, and this Delta variant has not helped things at all. So while a number of organizations have started to bring people back, now they're going back home again. So hybrid is very much, I would say, over 90% of what organizations are doing right now.
Yeah, and what about you, Sarah? Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if we even see a shift to more remote work in the coming weeks and months with, as Peter mentioned, the Delta variant. There's a lot of uncertainty that we're all experiencing at this point in time globally. So I wouldn't be surprised if that even shifts a little bit more to fully remote at some point in the near future.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Well, I'm going to pass things over to Peter now, who's going to review some information about the evolving workforce that we are all experiencing.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks, Katie. I appreciate it. And I'd like to start by just clearing up the differences between remote work and anywhere work. So the term anywhere worker has really become a popular trend that developed through the flexible work movement in the recent past. Traditional remote work is typically a static location, like a home office, whereas anywhere work locations could change with varying degrees of frequency. So essentially, anywhere workers are like digital nomads, for lack of a better term, who could work from the office one day, work from home the next, and then travel to a different city or state or even a country to work for a period of time. So this arrangement was pretty rare, I would say, prior to COVID, but the concept of offering employees the choice to work when, how, and where they want is becoming much more common, especially now that COVID is with us. So the question is, why is this important? Well, we've seen some really compelling stories and data in the news lately about what workers are currently experiencing as our country enters a new phase of the pandemic. A lot of organizations have already announced or will soon announce their return to the workplace, which is basically creating a lot of mixed emotions and uncertainty for quite a few folks out there. And this is really validated by a recent report from the US Department of Labor, which showed that a record, I think it was about 4 million people quit their jobs in April of 2021, which is the highest number in 20 years. Additionally, the employment site monster.com, they recently conducted a poll of US workers in mid-June. And I mean, it was an astounding 95% of respondents said they're considering finding a new job. That's a big number. So collectively, what does this data tell us? Well, some of those workers may have quit or may be thinking about quitting because they're unwilling to return to the office after working from home for more than a year and perhaps doing it successfully. Many workers have acquired an appetite for flexibility, and they're willing to make a switch to a new job or even a whole company if that's what it takes to keep that flexibility. With remote work, they were able to do things like ditch the commute, which is huge, have a lot more freedom and family time, and then perhaps save money without expenses like gas, dry cleaning, buying lunch, wear and tear on the car, things like that. And then frankly, the pandemic caused a lot of employees to reassess whether they enjoy what they do for a living, with many people starting to embrace the quote, life is too short to be unhappy mentality. Now, another factor could be that post-crisis confidence has increased, and some workers are experiencing basically, or not experiencing, but expecting higher merit increases or better compensation in general after what they've been through, and their current company can't or may not be able to provide it. Now, it's important to note that current worker experience is not necessarily specific only to the US. In a global survey that was recently performed by Accenture, it was about 3/4 of workers said they want a mix of office and remote work to become the new norm, with about a half and half split seen as the ideal balance. Now, whatever the reasons, it's pretty clear that workforce dynamics are shifting and they may never go back to the way they were pre-pandemic. So to help add more perspective to this overall thing and some context, let's visit our good friend, Abe Maslow. Most of you are probably very familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, which essentially outlines the fundamental needs of humans in a 5-tier pyramid model, which you can see on this chart right here. The basic premise is that humans must meet their physiological needs before they meet their safety needs. Then, when these two needs are met, humans intrinsically move on to seek things like love and belonging, all those needs, and so on. And then people will spend all their time and energy on the first two until they're satisfied, which means employers who want to maximize what they get from employees should do what they can to help people be thoroughly satisfied in those two categories. By doing so, you free the employees to be fully productive for you instead of being distracted by those things. Now, we can apply this theory to the pandemic to understand employee engagement needs both before and after COVID, because it's definitely changed. So we can get a better understanding of what employees are experiencing and thinking now. So the basic physiological needs for an employee are the things like salary and benefits that helps them be financially independent and live a life that they're accustomed to. Next comes safety needs, which are things like job stability and security, a safe work environment, stuff like that. So employees would not be satisfied with their jobs if they can't fulfill these security needs in a positive way. And job security and physical safety are both very, very important. Now, before COVID-19, these physiological and safety needs were frequently taken for granted. Employers simply provided them. After the outbreak of COVID, employees are feeling all sorts of anxiety and stress, and they're worrying about the future in an uncontrolled and unorganized work environment, including whether or not the office is even safe to return to. Now, remember, moving on to the third level in the hierarchy, employees start to consider and look for belonging. This need is fulfilled by what I would call a healthy work culture, cooperative colleagues, and supportive bosses, and things like that. Before COVID-19, the sense of belonging was taken care of by colleagues and HR and senior employees who all kind of blended together to create a feeling of camaraderie. After the COVID-19 outbreak, with employees going remote, the flow of communication and employee interaction has become basically compromised. People can no longer bond over impromptu in-person meetings or discuss work over a cup of coffee. In fact, anecdote time, the best workplace camaraderie I ever developed was not over a cup of coffee, but actually under it. I was pretty young at the time. I was in my kind of early to mid 20s. And this other fellow that I worked with was older, quite gruff, didn't get along with the young people, but he was pretty critical to my work. We needed to get along. He just didn't give me the time of day ever. And this went on for several months. But one day, he accidentally dumped a cup of coffee literally all over me, head to toe. Anything I needed from that point forward was rapidly forthcoming. I mean, it was great for our relationship, but it also meant I could do my job better, which meant our clients were happier. These are interactions you miss out on, even though it was uncomfortable, but it really helps to bond people together. Frankly, I can't imagine how difficult all of this is for those that are really earlier in their careers right now without the opportunity to connect with more seasoned employees over or under, in my case, a cup of coffee. Now, moving on, in the fourth level of the hierarchy, we find esteem, and this is where employees want things like acknowledgement for the effort they put into their work, recognition from coworkers, and a feeling of accomplishment. They're all vital for people to stay engaged and essentially really satisfied at work and fulfill their esteem needs. Before COVID-19, bosses and colleagues, they used to appreciate and recognize employees in regular group meetings and town halls and things like that, pretty common. After the COVID-19 outbreak, esteem needs have been compromised, I would say pretty severely in a lot of places. Managers and peers often struggle to keep the feedback loop going and recognize their remote employees in a timely manner or even at all. And then finally, the last level you see on the screen here brings self-actualization to the forefront. And this is where employees want to develop their skills and become experts in their respective fields. This level essentially boosts their potential. It usually results in maximum output and results and helps employees to lead and motivate others. If you want optimal output from people, it's important to keep them focused on and functioning in this zone and not be distracted by all those other things. Now, before COVID-19, self-actualization needs were generally managed by people in what had become basically kind of the norm, a normal and conducive on-premise work environment that's been developed over the last 100 or so years. After COVID-19, at least the outbreak, we're still in it, the change to the norm really disrupted things. Lack of physical connection, the limited infrastructure and communication channels, all those things really affected and essentially attenuated the pace of self-actualization for people. Instead of self-actualization, there's a lot of self-doubt, and employee motivation is frequently compromised. Motivation is absolutely crucial to self-actualization. So, in general, to keep employees engaged, connected, and satisfied with what they're doing, organizations really need to understand how employees' perceptions have changed during the pandemic, and then the downstream effect this has on each level of need in Maslow's hierarchy. We can't pretend that things aren't the same. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this from the employer perspective. So employers are certainly experiencing their own challenges as they determine the best pathway forward in this whole mess. Leadership is essentially assessing the impact of distributed workforces and whether or not they're here to stay for their organizations. So those assessments can include things like financial and productivity impacts, cybersecurity considerations, which have changed considerably, employee safety and well-being, communication techniques and strategies, which are definitely different without so many in-person meetings, as well as the bandwidth of management and how they're able to supervise their direct reports, which has been pretty difficult to do. So the results of these assessments can help companies determine which workforce model is best for them. For example, companies like Facebook and Twitter, they've committed to a fully remote workforce. Organizations like JP Chase ordered all employees to return the office back in July, but have things like 50% capacity limits. So employees are essentially rotating their in-office schedules. Salesforce, they've been quite vocal about their, quote, success from anywhere plan, they're calling it, where they're only returning business critical on-site employees to their facilities, and other employees are on more of a flexible work model and can work from wherever they choose. Other organizations are deciding if it's best to incorporate hybrid models or go back to in-office work for all employees. So lots of considerations. Now, labor shortages are also an issue. This could be a direct result of the mass resignation that we referred to earlier in the presentation. A lot of companies are now facing difficulties recruiting good talent due to the shift in workforce dynamics. Some workers just left the workforce completely during the pandemic and they don't plan to return. Now, that said, there's quite a few COVID relief benefits in the US that could potentially expire soon, or some actually very recently expired in the last day or so, such as the moratorium on evictions, increased unemployment benefits, deferring student loan payments, and things like that. So if the government continues to allow those to expire, the question is, will more people have no choice but to return to the workforce? So that could definitely have an impact going forward. Organizations are also rethinking their real estate investments. If they decide to adopt an anywhere work or hybrid or remote work plan, the question really becomes, are offices even necessary or necessary in the capacity that they existed before? Do they need to be as large or equipped as they once were? And then lastly on this slide, it's important to discuss the perception gap between management and employees. This is actually pretty interesting. While many workers who have been remote for the past year and a half feel they are more productive in their jobs, management doesn't necessarily agree. There was a recent Harvard Business Review study that showed about 40% of global managers said they believe remote workers perform worse than those in offices, and they doubt that long-term remote workers will be effective or their motivation will be very high. Roughly as many managers stated that they've also had difficulty managing their remote teams, which may lead them to questioning the loyalty and dedication of their workers. So with all that said, are there any silver linings? Well, as organizations explore different workforce models and assess the impact overall of the distributed workforces, they should take into consideration how they can benefit from an anywhere workforce. So as you see on the screen here, a recent study by Global Workplace Analytics revealed that the typical employer can save an average of $22,000 per anywhere worker per year if they change their working model. And these savings can be derived from some combination of things like increased employee productivity, big one, lower real estate costs due to less employees working from the office, and then of course, reduced absenteeism and turnover due to higher employee satisfaction. I know when I work from home, I tend to kind of bleed in between work life and home life, and I end up doing more work from home than I would potentially in the office. So that leads to that additional productivity too. Now, from all the evidence thus far, it seems like remote work in some form or fashion is here to stay. So with that in mind, it's critical for businesses to reevaluate and redefine their duty of care if they're employing anywhere workers. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept of duty of care, it's essentially the legal and moral obligation to safeguard others from harm while they're in your care, using your services, or they're exposed to your activities. So with an anywhere workforce, leadership should ask themselves a lot of important questions like, how will we ensure the safety of anywhere workers? How will we monitor hundreds or thousands of quote unquote offices, all these home offices we have now? How will we promote employee health and well-being from afar? All things we did while people were on site, now we've got to do it when they're dispersed to the winds. Now, another factor to consider is that putting employees first is actually really good for business. Employees who know that their employers care about their safety and well-being are actually more motivated and productive than those who feel like they're simply being treated as a commodity. In fact, companies have the ones that really focus on employee well-being, and they have really exemplary safety, health, and environmental programs. It's been studied, they actually outperform the S&P 500 by between 3 and 5%. And that was according to a Towers Watson's Staying at Work survey. All right, you've heard enough from me for now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Sarah to discuss the role of global threat intelligence in ensuring the safety of your anywhere workers. Sarah, take it away.
All right, thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Let's go ahead and dive in. So potential threats for anywhere workers, there are a lot. There are numerous potential threats to those anywhere workers that employers really need to plan for. There's criminal acts such as theft and violence, sexual assault, physical threats abound, and those are of course all very concerning. There's acts of terrorism, situations escalating around political unrest around the world. We're seeing a lot of this lately in all parts and regions of the world. There's all types of extreme weather, natural disasters, anything from blizzards and hurricanes to wildfires and earthquakes. We know this all too well right now. We're seeing so many wildfires, not only in the US, but around the globe. And then there's COVID-19, right? Cases in certain regions or countries could impact anywhere workers. And it doesn't just have to be the coronavirus, right? That's the hot topic and the thing that we're all concerned about right now. But there's also the seasonal flu, there's other illnesses. And these are all very concerning. There's going to be, or there never will be, a shortage of threats for employers and anywhere workers to contend with. And it's an evolving space, right? These threats will continue to evolve. And all you need to do is really look at the recent headlines, unfortunately, to really reinforce the evolving nature of the landscape of threats and what we're all contending at this point. If you look at just Western Europe a few weeks ago, they experienced the most severe flooding that devastated Germany, Berlin, the Netherlands, and unfortunately hundreds of people lost their lives. There's still over 100 people unaccounted for. And this, for Germany, they had never been impacted in something like this, in the past 100 years. Just really devastating and torrential and impactful floods that hit that area. We've also seen millions of acres burned from the wildfires in the Western US. I mentioned this just a second ago. Thousands, if not millions, of people have been displaced. And as a result of those fires, there's actually locations thousands of miles away that are already experiencing extremely poor air quality. I was just actually visiting the Northeast. I was in southern New Jersey, and you could see the smoke and the smog in certain areas because of the way the wind and the weather patterns are blowing those devastating wildfire smokes across the country. So that's just another, thing we contend with when it comes to the wildfires, and of course the droughts on top of it. And then I'm sure, as everybody's aware, the condo collapse that happened in Surfside, Florida, just about a month ago, or a few months ago, probably. One of our customers actually had an employee that resided in one of those buildings who sadly did not make it. And what that company demonstrated in investigating and managing that situation, including working and communicating with the employee's family throughout, was nothing short of extraordinary. And then, of course, something that touches all of us, it's COVID, right? It's a huge and ongoing conversation. We can't avoid it. Peter and I both mentioned the Delta variant earlier. It's definitely a hot topic and a point of concern right now. Here in the US and every state, the number of cases are up, and we're seeing the impacts both to the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So just a lot for employers and employees to contend to. These are just some examples of the countless threats to businesses that anywhere workers really do need to be concerned about, things that are happening now and happening recently, but will continue to evolve. Okay, so now that we've discussed the potential threats that the anywhere worker could face, let's talk about the potential impacts of these threats, right? There's a lot. There are impacts to the employees themselves, right? Their health could be affected if they become sick or injured wherever they might be around the world. Their safety could be at stake if they experience a criminal act, if they're nearby some sort of terrorism incident or a weather incident, natural disaster, or a protest that escalates in some sort of way. Again, we've seen this a lot as things have escalated around the globe in different regions and areas recently. And then their, well-being could suffer if they feel overworked, disconnected. That's a big thing that we contend with right now. Unengaged, along those same lines, or if there's a lack of communication or a perceived lack of communication from management. These are all situations facing the employee. And then the business impacts can be very substantial as well. In terms of business continuity or operations, the organization may have additional expenses from tracking and monitoring and communicating with this very dispersed workforce. Or they may experience, business continuity gaps. Peter got at this a little bit earlier, but they may need to increase security or protection from cybersecurity, dependent upon where employees have decided to relocate or travel to. They might be on different networks with an increased risk as well to stolen laptops or cell phones or other devices. So really, things that people don't necessarily take into consideration when we think about workers being anywhere around the globe. A company could also be affected by loss of productivity due to employees that are traveling that are distracted in remote locations. There may be different things going around them or going on around them that could be positive or negative, but definitely distractions to contend with. And then there's information silos. We all run this risk with people being at home or anywhere. Employees may be self-serving company information, drawing their own conclusions, as opposed to hearing news and information and updates directly from their leadership. Or then also, you know, they're not having those natural water cooler conversations, right? Where you're in an office, you're hearing things more directly from one of your colleagues or one of your leaders, and information is spreading a little bit more organically. That's not necessarily happening at this point in time. So definitely something to consider there and keep mindful of. I think it's always important and maybe even therapeutic to remember that our challenges aren't unique, right? We're not alone. Even the largest organizations struggle to keep up with the volume of threats occurring around the world. There are a lot. And as you are all aware, it's not just about monitoring and identifying these things. You have to be able to quickly understand the impact of something that's going on and happening around your people or around your business. You have to communicate with those who are in harm's way or that need to be involved in actually activating some sort of response for those who are in harm's way. And all of this requires time. It requires expertise, it requires planning, and for the most, it's not scalable to simply throw additional people or resources at these problems. For example, some organizations have mentioned recently the concern of not knowing that their employees moved from one city, state, or country to another. It's happening a lot. It's happening all across the globe. And with anywhere work, an employee's permanent address could really be in one location, but maybe they didn't tell their employer that they decided to work from maybe a relative's house for the summer, or that they may have relocated permanently and just not said anything. Maybe they didn't think it was the right time. They didn't know if it would stick. You know, it can be challenging to protect these anywhere workers when you simply don't know where they are or you haven't been able to track a lot of movement amongst your staff. But even more impactful from a time and resources perspective if you don't know, again, their whereabouts. This is being experienced across the board, across all industries at this point. So with this multitude of potential threats and impacts, we definitely recommend a modern mass communication solution that includes global threat intelligence, right? A kind of all-in-one solution so that you can keep track of things happening around your people and really respond to those effectively. So let me just give you a quick overview of how that solution works from our perspective. You know, you've got identifying of threats to your organization faster and being able to activate a response from one intuitive platform, right? You've got fast analyst verified intelligence, right? That ever so important human component of knowing that you're getting real and accurate information very quickly. 24/7 global coverage of threats, prioritizing based on real world impact, factoring facilities and home offices, right? That's super important now. All of our businesses have extended well beyond the home base or home bases that we used to have in our facilities. So not just the company's physical locations anymore. Automated impact assessments, real-time warnings, mobile app, and then notifications that can go directly to your employees based on their mobile location. It's really important as well. Okay, let's talk about, you know, why threat intelligence is so crucial, that intelligence to protecting our anywhere workers. And our global intelligence team, we come from all kinds of backgrounds and industries. Former security leaders from Fortune 500 organizations. We've got former government agency workers, like people from the CIA, military analysts, hugely helpful in comprising our team, and meteorology. We have a meteorology expertise amongst our team as well. We handle a lot of big and impactful weather events. And these experts monitor thousands of data sources all around the clock, 24/7, 365 days a year, really identifying real-time threats. And they identify incidents with possible or clear impact to both human life or business operations. And a lot of times those things meld together, right? A lot of things have both of those impacts. All of our intelligence, I mentioned this earlier, we're very passionate about this. It's human vetted. It's incredibly important to making sure that we're giving you accurate information, that you're not receiving misinformation. And our experts also contextualize and summarize the key points of intelligence to help you make a better informed decision. The more we can arm you with that information, the better off we feel that our customers are going to be and people on the receiving end. Geolocating, of course, being able to locate the incident and determine an impact zone around you, your business, whoever might be impacted. And then we also partner with a third-party vendor called GeoSure, who has an expertise in this area as well. The company specializes in providing risk scores at the city and the neighborhood level to help people better understand their surroundings when they're in an unfamiliar environment. So they have GeoSafe scores, they're called. They're available in 65,000 different cities and neighborhoods around the world. And GeoSure safety scores actually provide our customers another data point to reference when assessing the safety of their employees who might be working in an area that they're unfamiliar with, or maybe traveling to a different area. And the employee can actually access that information from the mobile app as well. So really empowering our employees with information across the board is really important.
And Sarah, I've just got to give a thanks to you and your team. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving home from the office and I was going to turn into a grocery store that's on my way home. And probably about a minute before I was about to go there, I got an alert from Alert Media saying that there was a mentally unstable person with a gun running around in front of the store. And after what happened at the King Supers Market in Boulder, I didn't want anything to do with that. So I just kept on driving.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for mentioning that. It's really powerful and impactful, everything that this team is supporting and supplying all of our customers and their employees with. And just every situation like that, for everyone, there's thousands more. And just our team very passionate about keeping, our customers and all their employees safe and out of harm's way, for sure. I know we jumped ahead to this one, so I think it's always nice to hear and reflect on how other companies and organizations are facing challenges. I mentioned this earlier, we're not alone. Our challenges are not unique. We're in this together. And a really strong example that I think demonstrates the importance of utilizing global threat intelligence is Coca-Cola United and how they communicate with their people during emergencies. They've got 10,000 people or more spread across 60 locations in the southern US. 14 of those locations are actually in coastal areas. So you can imagine the importance of weather information as in addition to additional threats in those areas. Well, many of their employees are actually those anywhere workers, so outside of a typical office setting. And Coca-Cola United, they definitely needed and valued having some sort of way to communicate with their employees during emergencies. So ranging from severe weather and hurricanes, right, that you'll see in those coastal communities, but also active shooter situations. Major traffic disruptions that can be really, impactful to not only a business, but to people that work for businesses and the way they're able to do their work. So using automated warnings through our global intelligence solutions, supervisors there are able to notify their teams about threats that are impacting their people and their locations, and really giving that 24/7 awareness with the minimal effort. Global threat intelligence provides both business and employees with the trust and the peace of mind that safety is the top priority, right? That we're all prioritizing safety across the board, that duty of care that Peter talked about, and ever so important. We actually have a really great podcast too, just, self-serving. I want to mention this as well, that Coke United was a part of, just really insightful and interesting things that came from that conversation with Peter. I'd really recommend that folks take a listen to that if you have time. And then I will go ahead and pass it back to you, Peter. I know you're going to talk about how to safeguard and communicate with anywhere workers, which is super important as we talk about all these different threats around the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Very insightful information you just provided. And there are a few key suggestions and best practices that we recommend to help keep your anywhere workers safe, well, and connected. The first thing an organization probably can and should do is require their anywhere workers, and this actually applies to business travelers too, to complete safety and security awareness training, which is really, really big. Anywhere workers really should be given the information they need to proactively avoid threats and protect themselves from risk. It's something that's oftentimes ignored, just taken for granted. Oh, they're not on our facility anymore. It's not our responsibility. We don't need to share anything with them. Not really the case. To fulfill your duty of care, ensure that employees are properly educated on a variety of subjects, things like how to keep a low profile while traveling, how to identify and react to common threats, and then how to get help when they need it. Even sharing just what seems like really seemingly simple personal safety best practices, such as not fighting back against muggers and not listening to loud music while walking, can really, really go a long way. Since safety risks can vary by person and location, you should also tailor the training to meet the employee's unique needs. Don't try to give a one-size-fits-all to everybody. For employees working abroad, sharing information on things like cultural norms, local laws, and any current events or conditions that may impact them is very key. If the employee is in a place with political instability, train them on how to avoid riots and political protests, and importantly, where to go if they feel like they're in trouble. Similarly, if your employee is in a hurricane-prone area or a location that's at risk for really any kind of severe weather or natural disasters, provide them with the proper communication tools so you can stay in touch with them reliably and consistently and pass on useful safety tips. But you can't do everything. The proverbial bird has to learn how to fly and take care of itself outside the nest. So with that idea in mind, to promote an efficient and effective safety culture overall, leadership should encourage and really empower anywhere workers to play an active role in their own safety. So we've probably all heard the phrase, if you see something, say something. Well, that applies to anything an employee experiences that they perceive to be unsafe or that could be a potential threat. And it's not just to themselves, it could also be to other employees or the business itself. At the company's primary physical locations, which we're not at very often now, but also any of the distributed workplaces, including their own home. So encourage people to exercise situational awareness when they're out and about, and to both trust and listen to their instincts. If something doesn't feel right, there could be danger. And that I talk to a lot of security experts on my podcast that I do, the Employee Safety Podcast, and a lot of them say that people out of embarrassment oftentimes avoid their instincts, and that can lead to trouble. Just encourage your people not to ever be embarrassed. Just trust them. Also, you want to make sure employees notify supervisors of their comings and goings. Sarah mentioned it before. There's people who have disappeared and gone to work at mom and dad's house or a relative's house or halfway across the country and never told anybody. It's not okay. If they ever have problems or issues, they should absolutely notify their supervisor immediately. If you're using an emergency mass communication solution that has a mobile app of some sort with like location services, highly encourage your employees to download and activate it so they can be notified of any kind of potential threats and safety concerns wherever they are. And especially with people not reporting in necessarily where they are and updating that in a database, being able to track on a mobile app, at someone's discretion can be very helpful, make it easy for them. With Alert Media specifically, our mobile app provides real-time threat warnings. I mentioned it before, the time I used it with that grocery store incident, that people can reference themselves so they don't have to wait for threat notifications from their employer. So I have personally used it, as I mentioned before, not just that one time, but several times in the last couple of months. So very, very helpful. And then finally, managers and leadership should take every employee concern seriously and investigate and address each and every report. If people even remotely feel like their concerns are being downplayed or worse, ridiculed, they just won't speak up ever again, and that's not good. So as I mentioned before, on the podcast, I end up talking to a lot of security professionals, and they almost always tell me that they love hearing from employees, especially when they're unsure about something, because they'd rather spend time investigating 100 things that turn out to be nothing than to miss something that turns out to be a real problem. So no one should ever be embarrassed for reporting something. Now, on this slide, another thing you can do to jointly enhance and simplify how you communicate with your people. Anywhere workers are frankly just inundated with overflowing inboxes, relentless pings from chat tools, and calendars packed full of virtual meetings and things like that. So it can be overwhelming. So oftentimes what happens is, for sanity and productivity, a lot of employees have developed these habits to essentially mute these channels during certain blocks of time that they set aside to focus on and make progress on various work that they're trying to get done. Now, this is totally okay when things are normal, but not optimal when an emergency happens. With a modern emergency communication solution that offers multi-channel notifications, you can increase message visibility, which is important when there's a real emergency happening, by delivering messages to multiple endpoints. You never want to just rely on one. So being able to send messages via voice call, text message, email, mobile app push, desktop pop-up, so it actually comes right up on their screen, Slack, Teams, chat tools like that, and more, can really be helpful because you can essentially reach employees wherever they are at the time of the emergency, because you don't know where they're going to be. It could be while they're in front of their desk, or it could be while they're walking their dog or heading off to the grocery store that's about to be under attack. You can ensure message deliverability and visibility by essentially asking for real-time responses through things like just simple read confirmations. Let me know you got the message, or answers to survey-style questions. And then importantly, you can reach the right audience with things like dynamic groups. So you're only contacting the people impacted in the actual impact zone of that particular situation, and not sending a message to a broader audience that's kind of confused, like, why are you telling me about this? That's 500 miles away or something like that. And just to speak a bit more on that second point, critical communications are really just the beginning of the conversation when you're ensuring the health, safety, and well-being of anywhere workers. The next step really is to solicit their feedback or provide them with a way to request help or ask questions. So this can be incredibly valuable during critical moments. Two-way communication is key to confirming things like the employee's safety status instantly, which can help you triage a situation and know where you should focus your efforts. You send a message out to 100, 1,000, 10,000 people, and you're able to quickly whittle it down and say, okay, these are the small 1 or 2% I need to focus on. I can effectively ignore those other folks right now. Really, really helps direct your actions. It also eliminates a lot of the guesswork from reporting incidents and allows you to consolidate and streamline communication workflows. Now, a key piece of feedback you always want to secure in an emergency is employee well-being or lack thereof, as I was indicating. So I would say that it's really important to demonstrate your commitment to the safety and well-being of your anywhere workers by sending them surveys and performing wellness checks. A lot easier to do when people are on site, they can see each other. Not so easy when people are spread all over the place and working from home or remote locations. So with an emergency mass communication solution, like the one we offer here at Alert Media, you absolutely can streamline and document the process for wellness checks. Based on how people respond, you can identify employees that need additional support and then follow up appropriately. For example, if you survey employees during, let's say, like a big storm, like a hurricane, and they choose a response like, I will need time to recover and repair. You can then follow up with that subgroup of people and offer additional support and make plans to maintain business continuity, get people to fill in for them while they're consumed with doing that recovery and repair. So having that real-time two-way communication can help not just the individual feel like they're being cared for and get them the assistance they need, but it also helps the business because it helps you plan on who's going to be available and who's not. Now, an example of a real-life scenario that demonstrates the importance of multi-channel notifications, two-way messaging, and surveys and all that is how Moss Construction, customer of ours, communicated with their employees during a hurricane that happened not too long ago. So Moss, if you're not familiar with the organization, it's a construction firm based down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and they actually have employees that live and work in Florida, obviously, but also California, Texas, and Hawaii. So they're pretty spread across a lot of different coasts. It was back in 2018 when Hurricane Lane was projected to make landfall in Hawaii, which was bizarro. That doesn't happen very often. All their employees in Florida are used to hurricanes and all the infrastructure is hardened for it. Not the case in Hawaii. People aren't ready for it, nor is the infrastructure. So the Moss team was able to prepare hundreds of workers that they had spread across the islands using the Alert Media solution, and they did this all the way from Florida. They didn't have to be in Hawaii. So very quickly and easily, they were able to send out multi-channel notifications to make sure they caught people on the right device that they had available to them, to the employees that were in the hurricane's path to keep them informed of the latest storm updates. And then they also set up an event page in Alert Media to house all storm-related information that was accessible on the web via a computer or mobile device, including things like hurricane preparation resources and the kind of a bulletin board-like functionality for people to ask questions and things like that. And then a few hours before the hurricane was about to hit, they sent out a survey notification to employees to confirm that they were actually ready for the storm. Because remember I mentioned before, the construction in Hawaii is a little bit different. They don't have storms like that. So not all the structures in people's homes were potentially ready to absorb the impact of a hurricane. So what that did is it allowed Moss to rapidly identify 4 employees that really felt like they and their families were ill prepared for the storm. And then they were able to connect with those people very quickly and get them out of their houses and into hotels that were much more secure structures. So that created a tremendous bond between the company and the employees, and they are very dedicated to this day, just knowing that the organization reached out to help them. So in summary, proper communication really is critical in safeguarding your anywhere workers, just like it was super important when people are on-prem. And this is just one example of how to efficiently and effectively communicate with them to ensure their safety. So with that said, Katie, I will go ahead and turn it back over to you now.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I just wanted to quickly mention that we have a number of related resources available to anyone who would like to learn more about protecting an anywhere workforce. And as we mentioned earlier, we have the Employee Safety Podcast. Every week, Peter interviews leaders in employee safety, business continuity, emergency preparedness, and topics like that. And those leaders discuss best practices and also just kind of uncover insights from their respective areas of expertise.
Oh, I forgot to mention, Sarah mentioned the Coke United, which is a great episode. I highly recommend that. But then also we had one with Moss Construction. So by all means, listen to that one as well. Some excellent tips. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's perfect. They're both really, really great episodes with really insightful advice on exactly what Peter was just mentioning. So we also have representatives from JetBlue, Charles Schwab, National Weather Service, Warby Parker. So it really runs the gamut. So if you're interested in that, we recommend you check that out and subscribe. And then we also have a remote worker guide. And that is just a great resource if you're looking to, assess or improve your communications to better engage your remote or anywhere workforce. So that's available on our website, or you can just drop us a line and we would be happy to send it to you directly. So I just want to take one more moment to quickly poll our audience one last time. And this is just to gauge your interest in hearing more about alert media. So if you would just take a quick moment to answer the question on your screen, are you interested in learning more about alert media and how we can help with anywhere worker policies, procedures, and communications? You can tell us yes, or you can tell us not at this time. So I'm going to give that just a few more seconds. And then Bob, you can go ahead and close up that poll. Because I do want to take some time to get to some audience questions now. So remember, you can use your chat box to ask us a question if you haven't already. We do have a few coming in here already, which is great. And we will answer as many questions as we can today. So Peter, actually, this first one is for you. What are you hearing from your customers or from others in the industry about how their anywhere worker plans are going?
Yeah, so I think everyone's still trying to just figure it out. That's the problem. No one knows really what's going to work yet. And I mean, we were talking about this before the webinar started, but the country's so divided now on how they respond to the vaccines, the masking, the having to stay at home. So I think the key thing that most people are saying is we're just being super flexible and trying to be understanding of where people are coming from when they say what they want to do, like come to the office or not come to the office. And they're not trying to make any hard and fast rules quite yet. That's the key thing. It's just being super flexible right now.
And then have you heard of any instances where because a company has reduced, say, their brick and mortar footprint, has that maybe translated into increased opportunities for remote employees to maybe ask for higher compensation or better benefits based on the savings? Or maybe not so much because then the infrastructure had to be adjusted to accommodate these types of hybrid environments? Have you heard anything like that?
No, absolutely. And that it's been a constant challenge because a lot of people are like, look, I'm doing the same work I was doing before. In fact, I'm even more productive. And here's the proof. And now you're telling me you want to pay me less because I've decided to move from San Francisco to Oklahoma. That's ridiculous. So it's kind of difficult to have that conversation with people. I think generally because of how competitive the workplace is now, and it's the employees market as opposed to the employers. Most employers are having to find ways to accommodate and continue to pay very similar wages that they were paying before to retain those employees. If they start having conversations around reducing benefits or reducing pay or something like that, then people have lots of options to move. So you got to be very, very careful in how you address that.
That's good advice. We're actually getting some threats questions in here, Sarah, so I'll direct these to you. Doesn't it slow down the process by having humans involved in the curation of the threat data? I would like the information as soon as possible. What are your thoughts there?
I think that's a good and very fair question. I think the way that people need to look at it from the perspective of gathering information is there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of data points that are coming into teams like a global intelligence team regarding threats globally. So to sift through all of those things takes time and energy, but also you have the reward of not having to have a team sift through them on their own. A lot of people also like to depend on artificial intelligence, which is helpful, right? It is helpful to quiet some of the noise, but not being human vetted, there's a lot of room for error, and there's also a lot of room for misinformation to push through. We've actually seen recently a lot of information coming through that's relevant to like gaming or to television shows or movies that are coming through open source intelligence and seemingly look like they're a real security threat going on in the world, when in fact it's not. It's actually, you know, staged in a movie environment or things like that that people are responding to. So, you know, it's very important in our opinion, and we're very passionate about having that human involved aspect to kind of, you know, vet the content, generate the content, and to very quickly get it to our customers. We're also very passionate about timing. The quicker that we can get information to our customers, the quicker they can make a decision. They can check on the safety of their employees. They can make some sort of business continuity decision. So that's why we employ, you know, analysts who are experts across the space, so they can very rapidly pull through and sift through information and get that quickly communicated.
Yeah, Sarah, just to back that up, there was an organization, I was talking to the director of security. They were about a 10 to 15,000 person organization. And he told me that they have tools out there that just inundate them with threat intelligence, but they'll sometimes get, you know, 1,000, 2,000 hits per hour. And it's just an enormous amount of data. And he and his team would sometimes spend 20, 30 minutes before they would finally pick out the thing that was actually real and impacted their people. Whereas with our solution, they can get it within a minute or two. Now, did they have to wait an extra minute or two? Yes, but with the previous way, they were having to wait 20, 30, sometimes, you know, more minutes before they actually found it. So it was actually faster to have our team sift through it than theirs.
It's a good point.
Definitely reflective of the timing.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, Sarah, can alert media limit the number of notifications we receive, or can we pick and choose the threats we want to be alerted about?
Yeah, so we have everything divided into categories. There are a number of different categories that also include different weather categories for, say, flooding or tropical activity, but general threat categories for crime and violence, for transportation issues. So those are really easy ways for customers that we have, for businesses that we support, to really subsect into very much manipulate the system to get exactly what they need or want in different areas. So I think that's really helpful for people who maybe aren't looking for transportation disruptions, but are looking for things that could impact employee safety, like crime and violence in an area. There are definitely ways to filter in and filter out to even decrease things even further.
And one attendee would like to know approximately how big is the threat intelligence staff?
We're just about 30 people, actually. We have a really great team of analysts and lead analysts across the scope, and a lot of different expertise, like I said, based in the team. And we're continuing to grow as we continue to support more customers and also more product that we can continue to bring to our customers with different focus. We've recently just added a bunch of focus towards different planned and upcoming events, which we know are incredibly important to our client base. Recently, we've been seeing a very big trend in increase in demonstrations globally for one reason or another, and we've dedicated a lot of new resources to making sure that we can help people understand these events and when they're happening, where they're happening, and what impacts could be with advanced warning and notice.
Fantastic. Peter, I think this one's probably best suited for you, but Sarah, feel free to weigh in as well. How do we convince our people to give us their personal cell phone numbers or opt into location services on our solutions mobile app?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say in the experience we've seen out there with lots of our clients, it's first start with the why. You have to be very transparent as to why you're doing it. You're not taking their information to get them to do more work on weekends or nights. It's just about their safety, to keep them informed. And then number two, make sure the messaging comes from the very top down. The higher up in the organization you can get, the better. If Isaac, the intern, is bothering people to get their home phone number or their personal cell phone number, nobody's going to want to give that to Isaac. But if they see something come from the CEO or a senior vice president with a very clear explanation for the why behind it, this is all about just keeping them informed and checking in on them when the bad things happen, people are much more likely to share that information.
Okay. And I'll stick with you on this one, Peter. Can alert media integrate with travel applications? How do you account for employees that are traveling?
Yeah, absolutely. This is obviously an area of concern for a lot of organizations because they can kind of keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening around static locations. But when people are out and about, that gets a little bit more nerve wracking. So there's a heightened level of visibility that's necessary on those folks. So first and foremost, we encourage people to use our mobile app because at that point, it's really easy to track where someone is. Now, we know we can't get 100% adoption for whatever reason. People don't want to download it or turn on location services. So absolutely, we can integrate with travel tracking systems, all the popular ones like Concur, Carlson Wagonlit, American Express, Agencia, you name it, there's quite a few. As long as you have the information stored about where someone is going to be and when, you can easily synchronize that into our system on a routine basis, like every day it updates, the user's profile is updated, and then that the user, hey, they normally live at this address, they normally work out of this location, but they happen to be traveling today and tomorrow in New York City. So if anything happens, we know that they're there and we can send them notifications while they're on premise.
Fantastic. Sarah, are the alerts personnel focused only, or can they be supply chain and other focused?
Sure. So one of our categories actually is transportation and infrastructure. We definitely deal in supply chain. I think everybody probably remembers very acutely what happened in the Suez not too long ago. Those are the types of events that have mass supply chain interruptions globally. And those are the types of things we definitely want to bring to our customers and to their employee base because they can be highly impactful. We also have a weekly threat intelligence briefing where we talk about a lot of the high-level infrastructure challenges that are going on globally as well. That's just another way that we try and bring our customers insights and information that can be really helpful to running a business from that aspect.
Excellent. Well, that unfortunately is all the time that we have for questions today. There were a couple here that we didn't get to, so don't worry, we will follow up with you after this just to make sure that you get all the information that you need. But thanks to everyone who did submit a question to us today. And I just want to thank Peter Steinfeld and Sarah Prattley for joining us and for sharing their insights and expertise. Peter, if anybody has additional questions for you or just wants to follow up with you after today's webinar, what's the best way for them to reach you?
I would say just send me an email, peter.steinfeld@alertmedia.com, or you can shoot me a note on LinkedIn. My profile's up there.
Excellent. And what about you, Sarah?
Absolutely the same. Happy to receive email, very active on LinkedIn if anybody wants to find me there as well.
Okay, great. Well, that concludes our presentation today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. And of course, I want to thank Bob at DRJ for hosting today.